UFC Fight Night, Gane versus Spivac, full card predictions. This is the Paris card, and I'll be quite honest with you guys. This is not one of my more confident cards. A lot of debuting UFC fighters, a lot of fighters that have not had too much experience in general in MMA. So as I just said, I'm not super confident in a lot of these fights, but either way, I will give you guys the full card predictions as I do every single week, starting with the very bottom of the card, making my way to the top. And starting right away, Sarah Farron and Jacqueline Calvacanti. This is not one where I looked into a lot. I didn't spend a lot of time researching this one really at all. I do know that Sarah Farron sucks, so I'm picking Jacqueline Calvacanti. She's 26 years old. Um, Fighting out. I understand Zara Farron's French, and this is a card in Paris, so it makes sense why she's on the card. But she's 39 years old. She's not very good. This is a catch weight of 140 pounds. But just looking at the fight, it's Zara Farron, terrible fighter. Lost all three of her UFC fights by finish. Well, not the Josiane Nunes fight, but Nunes looked two weight classes smaller than her, and she still lost that fight. And then she got finished by Felicia Spencer and Megan Anderson, who honestly neither of them are fantastic fighters. Jacqueline Calvacanti, I mean, I know she did lose in the PFL to Martina Jandrova. I believe that was on the Challenger Series of the PFL a year and a half ago. But since then, she's won 3 fights in a row, and not much to say about this fight except for Zara Farron is old. She's not very good. I think this is a setup fight for Jacqueline, and I'll just move on. You guys probably don't care much about that fight either. Now, this fight is actually pretty good, though. Farid Basharat versus Clayton Rodriguez. Very, very good fight. I'm going with Farid Basharat. I really think highly of the Basharat brothers. I think the Basharat brothers are, you know, really good bantamweights and just good in general, like regardless of weight division. I think these guys are very technical. Farid and Javid Basharat. I think they're, they're very smart as far as fight IQ goes. They don't make too many mistakes in the striking or the grappling, and I think that's a big deal when it comes to a fight against Clayton Rodriguez, because Clayton Rodriguez, he is a somewhat powerful guy. He does have some finishes on his record, and he can get into a firefight. I mean, we've seen it happen before. Beat Shannon Ross, but Shannon Ross isn't really UFC caliber. We saw Shannon Ross get flatlined by Jesus Aguilar in about 20 seconds. So that win hasn't really aged entirely well at all. CJ Vergara loses a split decision. And that's the one where I'm like, all right, if you lose to CJ Vergara, a lot of people thought Clayson won that fight, but I think Farid Basharat is just too technical for Clayton Rodriguez. Even before that, I mean, he's beaten some guy. Nobody that he's fought is on the level of Farid Basharat. Basharat's last fight was against Damon Blackshear. He looked very good in that fight. Out grappled Blackshear. Blackshear did have him. I think it was a triangle, if I'm not mistaken. It was either a triangle or like a triangle armbar at the end of the fight. But Basharat was, beating him in the grappling and the striking the entire fight, just outpointing a very good fight. Like we saw Damon Blackshear last week, or I think was it last week or 2 weeks ago. Regardless, we just saw Blackshear fight, and in the past, just watching Blackshear, you could tell that he's a good fighter in the division, and the fact that Farid Basharat, beat him easily, pretty much, just goes to show Clayton Rodriguez is a flyweight moving up to bantamweight here. I just think Basharat, undefeated, 10-0. I think he cruises here. I don't think it's necessarily an easy fight, but I think he does just outpoint Clayton Rodriguez to a decision. I'll say 30-27, potentially 29-28, but I do think Farid Basharat is the rightful favorite. I believe now he's even bigger of a favorite, close to minus 400, which is kind of pushing it a little bit, minus 400, because Clayton is a skillful fighter, but I do think Farid Basharat gets the win. Next is another fight, which is just not good. Nora Carnoli versus Jocelyn Edwards. Nora is terrible. I'm going with Jocelyn Edwards. As much as I hate to pick Jocelyn Edwards in any fight in the UFC ever, but Nora is many years older. She's about to be 34 years old. Jocelyn's only 27, about to be 28. So Jocelyn's the younger fighter. She's fought the much better competition. If you look through her record, she's fought UFC caliber opponents. 4-2 in the UFC. Now, granted, some of her wins are by split decision. Lucy Pudilova, Jiyeon Kim, and she hasn't fought the top of the division necessarily, but she has fought UFC competition. She's fought the much better competition than Nora here. Nora's fought nobody. I believe it was the Priscilla De Souza fight, or maybe the Julia. I forget which fight it was I was watching, where she took. It might have been this fight actually. It might have been the Juliet Chukwu fight, where she took her down, got reversed against a 2-0 opponent. Like, I don't know, if you're not dominating these trash cans, and I hate to call them trash cans, but let's be honest, 2-0 opponents on the regional scene, nobody's ever heard of them. If you're not dominating those, those girls, I don't know if you're going to be able to dominate Jocelyn Edwards. It is women's MMA, so you never know what's going to happen. Maybe Jocelyn Edwards just lays an egg and just gets beat up and loses a decision or something, but I got to pick the woman with more UFC experience, the younger one, and the one that just should be overall better. I believe she also trains out of Extreme Couture, so that's another thing you got to throw into the pot when you're talking about this fight. I do think Jocelyn Edwards should get it done via decision. Angelusa versus Reese McKee. Finally, we're starting to get into some of the more interesting ones. We've had some stinkers in the beginning of the card, but this one, another good one. Angelusa, Reese McKee. A lot of people are picking Angelusa here. I'm going to go with Reese McKee. I think Reese McKee is, you know, at least in the striking, I think his striking is actually pretty good. Now, he does get hit sometimes. He is hittable. And the question that I have with Reese McKee is his grappling. I've seen him getting taken down in, a lot of his fights that he's been in. So that is a concern for me, watching Reese McKee get taken down in a lot of his fights. But, he doesn't quit. He doesn't quit when he gets taken down. I know he got beat up easily by Chimaev. He got ground and pounded there relatively easily, but that's Chimaev. Chimaev would do the exact same thing to Angelusa. So, no harm, no foul in that loss. Since then, though, he's won 3 fights in a row in Cage Warriors. He's a guy that will put the pressure on you. He's got a good jab. I think he's got solid boxing. He is pretty. I would say he's a better striker here than Angelusa. He's much bigger than Angelusa. If you look at the size of those two, 6'2" to 5'10", longer reach by 4 inches as well for Reese McKee. I just think that this is his second run in the UFC. He had a run earlier. He lost to obviously Chimaev and Alex Morono, who are two. Chimaev is one of the best in the world right now, and Alex Morono is he's a very underrated fighter. Alex Morono's been a solid UFC fighter for a long time. So losing to those guys is no joke. I think this is a step down in comparison to those two. I mean, sure, you could say he hasn't fought the greatest competition, but the Cage Warriors guys that he's beaten are not like bums. Angelusa nearly got finished by AJ Fletcher. If you guys remember that fight, AJ Fletcher was in that second round. AJ Fletcher was teeing off on Lusa. Lusa was backing up. He turned for a second. He was turned up against the cage. I thought the ref could have stopped that at any moment. He didn't stop it, and Angelusa ended up winning the fight. But he absolutely would have been in the right to stop that fight. I don't think anyone would have complained if AJ Fletcher kept pouring on the volume and kept landing punches on Angelusa. He would have won the fight. AJ Fletcher shot a takedown, which was a stupid fight IQ mistake. If he didn't shoot that takedown and he just kept letting his punches fly, he would have finished Angelusa. He would have beaten him. So I don't think Angelusa, if he would have fought a smarter opponent, I don't think he should have beaten AJ Fletcher in his last fight. He got pieced up by Munir Lazez, which I do think could happen here. I'm not saying Reese McKee is, going to do the exact same thing as Munir Lazez, but I could see it being, a somewhat competitive striking fight, but Reese McKee landing the better shots, pouring on the volume, landing the jab. He's got a big reach advantage. He's a bigger man. I can see him just keeping Lusa, on the end of everything. Lusa not being able to. If Lusa looks for takedowns, and if that has to be Lusa's game plan, I would imagine. Training at a Kill Cliff, good gym, but we've seen some of the Kill Cliff. Just because you're training at Kill Cliff, I mean, I know I bring up Kill Cliff as one of the best gyms in the sport. Just because you're training at Kill Cliff doesn't mean you're, going to be able to beat everyone. I mean, look what happened to Kinoshita last week. I picked Billy Goff to beat Kinoshita. Kinoshita lost that fight. I'm not sure if Reese McKee is going to be able to get a first round body shot knockdown or knockout, but I do think that Reese McKee can win this fight. I think he's being a little bit underrated here. He's a younger fighter as well, albeit only by like a year and a half, but still, he's fought the better guys. If you really look through their entire record, the best guy that Lucis fought, he did fight Munir Lazez, who's pretty good, and JDM, who's very good. Reese McKee's fought Chimaev, Morono, and three guys in Cage Warriors, all solid guys, and some of those were 5-round fights as well in Cage Warriors where he won those. So the pick for me here is going to be Reese McKee. Um, if it goes a distance, I think he can, turn up the volume, as the rounds go on. Yeah, I think Reese McKee's going to win this fight. Next is Taylor Lapilus versus, oh man, tough name to pronounce, Colin Loughran. For Loughran, I did see a video of him flipping off the crowd, the French crowd, at the face-offs or at the weigh-ins, whatever. So the guy's he's fired up, he's ready to fight. Loughran is. I'm sure Lapilus is. Lapilus hasn't fought in a year and a half, as you can tell. But the pick for me is going to be Taylor Lapilus. I do think Loughran's actually pretty solid. I think he's he's got good power, very good power. He, was it the Dylan? Yeah, the Dylan Hazan fight. That was an incredible fight, for an incredible finish for him, I should say. He landed, a beautiful combination. Landed, I think, one or like maybe two uppercuts right to the chin, a right hand following it. Beautiful finish by Loughran. That was, a great knockout to have, in Cage Warriors. That was, but for Taylor Lapilus, I feel like he's just fought the better level of competition, and I think he will be able to outstrike Loughran. Loughran is a small guy, even for bantamweight, he's 5'6". He just doesn't he's kind of a stocky guy. He can wrestle a little bit. I did see a video on his Instagram of him training with Mike Grundy, which is Mike Grundy's an Olympic caliber, not an Olympic caliber. He was an Olympic silver medalist, if I'm remembering correctly. So Mike Grundy's a very good wrestler. I do think Loughran does have the grappling edge here, but the question is, will he get the fight to the mat? If Loughran gets the fight to the mat, I think he can, this could be a little bit of danger for Taylor Lapilus. But if it stays on the feet, outside of, like a big knockout coming, which I don't know if it's going to happen against a guy like Taylor Lapilus, who's, going to have a huge reach edge, going to be the better striker overall. We've seen him do very good in the striking in his last fight. He hasn't fought in a while, but against Demarce Pena, if you just look at his wins, Marcus Breno, who's in Bellator now, Nate Maness, who's a UFC fighter, Josh Hill by split, he hasn't been the most active, but he's fought better competition and beaten better guys. Fighting in France now, training out of MMA Factory, same gym as Gane, same gym as William Gomez, who's also on this card. Nasruddin Imavov is also from that gym, albeit those are, at least Gane and Imavov are much bigger guys, but still he's training with very, very good guys. I do think Loughran, I think he's only 27. I think he will be a good UFC fighter eventually, but I think right now, I believe Taylor Lapilus has enough to beat him. I'll say by decision. Next fight, and this is the start of the main card already. As I mentioned, some of these fights are a little bit tough to break down. I'm just being honest with you guys. It's not the easiest card for me to predict. So sorry if I'm not breaking it as in depth as I would on some other cards, but I'm trying my best here. I don't have the most information as other fights, but first fight of the main card is Morgan Charriere versus Manolo Zucchini. For Morgan, another Cage Warrior guy. There's a ton of Cage Warrior guys on this card. Morgan obviously being one of them. Won his last 3 fights in Cage Warriors against Diego Silva, Pedro Souza, and Daniel Bazant. And Manolo Zucchini, one thing I want to point out about him is, I don't think Manolo, here's what I'm seeing a lot of what he does. He throws a lot of naked leg kicks, which I don't think is very like when you get to the higher levels, when you fight guys that are experienced like Morgan, you can't be making mistakes like that. I've seen it multiple times with him. He throws a ton of like inside low kicks. Just the only thing he throws, he'll just throw a bunch of them, and he's able to get countered. He can get countered off of those. He can get rocked when he throws those as well. I don't like that at all. When I'm looking at him, and I do think Manolo also hasn't fought the level of competition that Morgan Charrier has fought. This it's a pretty common theme on this card. The levels of competition that some of these guys have fought. New debuting UFC fighters. Morgan's a minus 345. Should he be a minus 345? Both debuting fighters. Who knows? He is the much more experienced guy, though. Fought the better guys. Should have a striking edge here. Maybe I do think he could actually find a finish here in the opener of the main card against Manolo Zucchini in in France here. So I'll go with Morgan to find a finish. I think that's definitely a possibility. Maybe Manolo throws some naked leg kicks, starts throwing, and also I'm not really too big of a fan of his boxing either. So maybe he'll just throw some wild stuff. He'll get countered. Morgan actually did the fight I was watching from Morgan. He did have a beautiful left hook counter. I believe it was the Diego Silva fight? I believe it was the Diego Silva fight where he landed a beautiful left hook counter that dropped Silva. I believe it was that fight, but it just goes to show that he also has counter striking ability. And if Manolo makes a mistake, he can capitalize. So I will go with Morgan there. Another one where I'm like, you would think it gets better as the fights go on as far as making picks, but another one that's just kind of like confusing to me. William Gomez versus Yanis Gamori. For Gamori, you know, I did see his fight against Vladislav Novitsky, and you know, did he really win that fight? I mean, the first round was competitive. He could have lost the first round. The second round, he gets dropped. He gets rocked and hurt bad by Giannis, or not by Giannis. He is Giannis by Vladislav Novitsky. He got rocked by him bad in the second round. I don't know. I mean, I'm going with William Gomez here. He's just again, I hate to keep bringing up the more experience, I've been saying it over and over. It's like I'm a broken record at this point, but it's true. He's fought you know, granted, not the greatest level of competition, but he beat Jarno Aarons and Francis Marshall, and he barely threw any punches, in either one of those fights. He doesn't, not the most, doesn't have the most output, doesn't have the most volume. I, I don't even know what the UFC, who the UFC wants to win this fight. If this fight goes a distance, this could be a split decision, honestly, which makes me want to lean Giannis, but in a way, I do think William Gomez is the better striker. I think I don't know if he's going to find a knockout. I think this will probably go the distance. Another one where it's like, I really don't know because we haven't seen either of these guys against really good levels of competition. I have seen William Gomez at least fight in the UFC, two, you know, two 15-minute fights in the UFC against Aarons, who's not the greatest, but against Francis Marshall, who's also not the greatest, but, decent. And, he beat both of them, very close fights. Maybe he can rack up a third close fight against Giannis and win by decision just by, staying on the outside. Giannis is very flat-footed in his striking from what I've seen. Very flat-footed. Um, not the greatest striker in my opinion. I do think William Gomez, should win this fight just by, staying on the outside and beating a more flat-footed striker in Giannis. So I'm going to take Gomez there. Again, not the most confident pick. Moving along on the main card, it is Volkan Ozdemir versus Bogdan Guskov. In this one, I'm actually going to go with Bogdan Guskov. Bogdan has, let me just say this, the only reason I'm picking Bogdan, and this could turn into just a terrible pick if Volkan destroys him, but what I've seen from Bogdan is he has insane power in his hands. Like if he lands clean on you, he can put you out. Volkan Ozdemir is hittable. In his last fight, I was watching against Nikita Krylov. Krylov was landing on him, and Krylov, Krylov doesn't have the power of Bogdan, but if Bogdan lands some of those same punches, some of those right hands, if Bogdan can land those right hands that Krylov was landing on Volkan, If he can land some of those punches, I think Volkan might go to sleep. I think there's definitely a possibility. Volkan's not old, but Bogdan is a younger guy. Volkan's 6-6 in the UFC. He's had a lot of UFC experience, but it's just one of those styles make fights. If it gets extended, we don't know how good Bogdan Guskov's cardio is going to look because a lot of his fights finish in the first round by knockout. He's a very powerful guy. Nursultan Ruzaboev and Bruno Ferreira is not the best example because Bruno Ferreira wasn't really a very experienced UFC fighter like Volkan is. But we've seen, like that. We've seen it before where one guy comes in, everyone's doubting him. He hasn't fought anybody, and then he comes in here, Ruzaboev. I was probably the only person to pick Ruzaboev out of anyone I watched. Um, I picked Ruzaboev. Ruzaboev went in there and beat him in the first round. In this fight, I think Volkan Ozdemir, solid fighter, but he's so hittable. Like I could just see him going to sleep here. I could just see Bogdan getting a highlight. There's a reason Bogdan's on the main card, why they brought him in. It is a short notice fight, but the UFC sees something in this guy. Is he a fraud? We'll find out. But I'm gonna roll the dice here and say that he can find a knockout. Massive power, good boxing. Volkan Ozdemir's hittable. That's just that's how I'll play it. So Bogdan Guskov for me. Featured fight of the night: Benoit Saint Denis versus Thiago Moises. This could be the fight of the night. I think this is definitely going to be a fight of the night candidate, if not the fight of the night. I'm going with the God of War, Benoit Saint Denis. Now, let me mention before I get into the breakdown, because I actually can break this one down more so than a lot of the other fights on the card. I will say, before I get into Benoit, I will say it first with Thiago Moises. Thiago Moises is an elite grappler, and I'm talking really, really elite. He is fantastic on the mat. So I would not be too confident in Benoit Saint Denis grappling against him. But I don't think this fight's going to be taking place. I hope it doesn't. For Benoit's sake, I hope he doesn't force the grappling. I hope he has shot some sloppy takedowns in the past that he got because he hasn't fought the level of grappler that Thiago Moises is, but he can't shoot sloppy takedowns here. That's the worry I have with him. The main worry is if he does get a little bit tired and shoot sloppy takedowns, Thiago Moises can submit him. Thiago Moises is dangerous jiu-jitsu, dangerous grappling, and very technical striking as well. Striking is very technical, very clean. The reason I'm picking Benoit, though, after giving Moises all these compliments, I just don't think Moises has the dog in him that Benoit Saint Denis has. And I hate to pick someone just because I think they have the dog in them. But when you look at Benoit Saint Denis, he'll go through hell and back, so and keep fighting. He will. He was getting his ass beat so badly by Alessio Zaleski. Zaleski was beating him from pillar to post, absolutely destroying him, and he didn't quit. He kept, he stayed in there, kept fighting, didn't give up on himself. And in every one of his fights, even if he gets even if he gets rocked a little bit, even if he's in it, I just think he's going to keep pushing, keep pushing. I don't think Thiago Moises has the power to knock him out. If Zaleski couldn't find a knockout at 170, I don't think Moises is going to knock him out at 155. But Benoit Saint Denis is the bigger guy. He's a more powerful guy if they do get into like a slugfest. And I do think that is what Benoit Saint Denis should do. I think what he should do here, if you want to beat Thiago Moises, you get in his face and you make it a firefight. You get in his face and throw bombs at him. You can't play like a technical striking game. I think Benoit Saint Denis, his last fight against Ismail Bonfim, he should implement a similar style. Throw hard kicks to the body, make Moises defend them. I know Moises could probably catch a kick and look for a takedown, but if Benoit's throwing, hard kicks to the body, it's going to be tough for Moises to catch them. Mix in some, he does have some powerful hooks as well in the striking, or in the boxing, I should say. So, against the cage, I think that's how he finished. Who was it? Gabriel Miranda up against the cage. So I think that's what he should do. I think he should, throw the body kicks, let those go, and then come up top with just big bombs. and make it a firefight. That's what he has to do. He has to make this a dogfight. I think he has more dog in him than Thiago Moises. We've seen Moises overwhelmed already by Joel Alvarez, who, granted, Joel Alvarez is a very, very dangerous fighter, but Alvarez, he's more of a grappler than he is a striker, and he just overwhelmed Moises and just finished him on the feet against a standing TKO. Just, Moises looked like he didn't want to be in there. He looked like he was. I don't want to say he looked like he was quitting because he didn't quit on himself, but he was just covering up against the cage. If Benoit Saint Denis has you in that position, and if you're covering up against him, he's just going to he's going to let it all fly. He's going to let his hands fly, throw knees, throw kicks. Like, this guy's going to hunt for the kill, and I think that's the difference here. I think that's the difference here. I think Moises is more technical. He does have the jiu-jitsu and grappling ability, but I just think it's going to come down to, similar to like a Dricus. I don't want to say they're like they're not the same fighter, but similar to like a Dricus. I feel like, some guys, they just got the dog in them. They're going to keep coming. They're going to keep throwing bombs. They're going to keep pressuring you, and they're not going to give up on themselves. And those are the type of guys I like. I know I picked against Dricus against Whitaker, but watching Dricus win, make like, I really hate to compare the two because they're not the same fighter, but it just kind of reminds me of one of those guys that's just going to keep going, not give up, and I think Benoit can get this done. Also, it's in France, so if this does go to the scorecards, you know the crowd's gonna be cheering on Benoit. Everything he does, the crowd's gonna be going crazy for. So I'll have to add that factor on as well. I do think Saint Denis can win this fight, though. Co-main event of the evening: Menon Furo versus Thug Rose Namajunas. Um, Everyone's on Menon Furo here. What's the percent? 67% are picking Menon Furo to win this fight. Guys, I'm picking Rose Namajunas. I know she's moving up a weight class. I know the grappling match that I even said, like, that was not Jillian Robertson's a very good grappler, but losing in a minute. The Carlos Esparza fight was terrible. One of the worst fights I've ever seen. I didn't even go back and rewatch the Esparza fight just because that fight was just god awful in every sense of MMA. It was terrible. They didn't do anything. It was a staring contest for 25 minutes. It was a waste of everyone's time. Terrible fight. But now she's an underdog, right? Now people are writing her off because of that fight. And sure, she's moving up in weight. She's fighting a contender in Manon Fiorot. But Manon Fiorot is 33 years old. Rose Namajunas is the younger fighter. People act like Rose Namajunas is done. People are saying like she's done. Her head's not in it. She's younger by 2 years. You know what I mean? Like, I would, if she was like 37, 38, like towards the end of her career, I would say, all right, but she's still young. She still has she has potential still, even after that terrible fight against Esparza. It was a bad showing. It happens. Some fighters have some bad nights at the office. That was a terrible night for both Carla and her. I don't think it's going to be the same. I think Rose, I wasn't really impressed. Like, everyone seems to be really impressed with Manon Fiorot. I just don't see it. I really don't. I don't see, like, a lot of her striking is just her throwing side kicks to the body, side kicks to the legs. Like, it just isn't. It doesn't impress me as much as it seems to impress everyone. It just doesn't impress me. Watching her fight, I just see Rose winning the fight. I think she's a better grappler. I think the striking. I'm not even a fan of Fiorot's boxing. I think a lot of what she does is just, over and over. It's just a side kick, side kick, side kick. Like, she throws a ton of those. For Rose, she's gonna be at a size disadvantage, and I understand that Furrow could just try to pick her apart from the outside, but I think Rose will be able to. I think she'll be able to develop a game plan to beat Manon Furrow. I just see it happening. More experienced fighter as far as like the higher level. I understand Manon Furrow's fun, good level competition. Don't get me wrong here. I mean, Victoria Leonardo, Tabitha Ricci, she finished. Myra Bueno Silva, she beat Jennifer Maya and Caitlin Chukagian. But this is different. This is Rose Namajunas. This is a former champion. This is a girl that went 25 minutes, just went 25 minutes, like a year ago or so with Zhang Wei Li, who we just saw destroy in her last fight. So I just think it's one of those where Rose Namajunas being overlooked. She's very good as an underdog. If you look at Rose Namajunas' best performances, actually, the first Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight, she was a 5-1 underdog. She goes in there and wins in the first round. The second Joanna fight, she also won. That was an even. The fight was even odds. The Wei Li fight, Zhang Wei Li and Rose Namajunas. Wei Li was a minus 220. Rose is an underdog. Another great performance by Rose. I feel like a lot of her best performances is when people overlook her, and I think people are overlooking her in this fight. So give me Rose Namajunas to get back on track, beat Manon Fiorot, and possibly look for a potential title fight at 125. And lastly, we have the main event of the evening. Bone Gamin's Cyril Gane versus Sergey Spivac. Everyone's on one side or the other here. Like, well, obviously everyone's on one side or the other. Everyone seems to be heavily on one side, either heavily on the grappling side of Spivac or heavily on the superior striking skills of Cyril Gane. I'm going to tell you guys, I'm on Cyril Gane here, and I just like when I close my eyes, like if you close your eyes and try to picture this fight, right? You close your eyes and try to picture this fight and you try to think, all right, what's going to happen? Do I think Spivak's going to go out there and just grapple and just take down Gane and submit him, or do I think Cyril Gane's going to pick him apart on the feet? The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I think of their styles. I think Cyril Gane's just going to pick him apart. I think Cyril Gane's going to pick him apart, and I think after this fight, people are going to look back on it and say, "Man, I can't believe Cyril Gane was a big under," or I can't believe um, Gane wasn't a heavier favorite than a minus 175. I think Cyril Gane is much better in this. I think that it's not even competitive in the striking. I think he's so much better than Spivac. I think Spivac does have the grappling to give him trouble, to give him problems, but it's a 5-round fight. Cyril Gane lost to Francis Ngannou and John Jones. The Francis Ngannou fight is what worries everyone. It's what people are saying is he got taken down and controlled by Francis Ngannou. The same thing's going to happen to with Spivac. Francis Ngannou is one of the strong. Francis Ngannou has unbelievable strength. He's not a grappler. I get it. He's known for his power, but Francis Ngannou is not quite as bad on the mat, I guess, as everyone is saying he is. Francis Ngannou in the Stipe fight showed that his grappling is improved. Not to say Francis is good grappling, but it's definitely has improved grappling. And against Spivac here, his other loss for Gane was against John Jones, the greatest fighter of all time. And that wasn't a good look for Gane, but he lost to John Jones. John Jones would destroy Spivac as well. So I think people are just, they're overlooking Gane. I know he's a favorite, but a lot of people are overlooking, him because of that last performance. A lot of people on Topology actually are picking Gane, but I see a lot of people on YouTube and a lot of people, making picks that are picking Spivac. I just don't see it. I just see Gane picking him apart. I don't think Spivac will be able to land a lot of the takedowns, like clinch takedowns, judo style takedowns is what Spivac's going to be looking for. I think Gane just has too superior movement on the feet. I think he knows what Spivac's going to do. In the Francis Ngannou fight, Gane was not expecting to wrestle. He was not expecting to grapple. Against John Jones, he should have been expecting to grapple, but in this fight, he 100% knows he will wrestle. He knows Spivac will try to take him down, will try to land the takedowns and submit him. He knows 100% what Spivac's going to do. I think he's ready for it. I think he picks apart Spivac. I think Cyril Gane wins his fight in France. I think he's also undefeated in France. His losses are to Francis and Jones. I think that both of those fights were in Vegas. Cyril Gane in his home country of France. I think he gets it done here. I think he finishes Sergey Spivac in the middle rounds. I'll say third round finish for Bone Gamin's Cyril Gane. Probably throws some, kicks up the middle to the body, weakens Spivac to the body, maybe lands like a big overhand or something like that, and finishes Sergey Spivac. So those are my predictions for the UFC Paris card. Gane versus Spivac, Fiorot versus Namajunas in the co-main. Sorry guys if that was, some of these breakdowns weren't the best. I know some of them, like Gomez and Giannis Gamori, the Morgan and Zucchini fight, like some of these were not the most in-depth breakdowns, and I apologize about that. It's kind of hard for me to find a lot of information and a lot of footage on some of these guys. So I did the best I could. I hope you guys did enjoy the video though. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.